Welcome to the program. My guest is Dr. Pam Moran. She is the superintendent of Albemarle County Schools right here in Central Virginia, a past winner of the Superintendent of the Year for the Commonwealth of Virginia, and she currently serves on the Board of Higher Education for the Commonwealth of Virginia. Welcome back to the program.
Coy, it's great to be back, and as you know, I always say to people, I'm just Pam.
Just Pam.
Just
okay.
Pam. So
all right,
it's
Pam.
Great to see you.
I have so much I want to ask about. The future of education, the future of high schools, the SOLs, testing. But I want to start with something that a lot of people might not know about. In Albemarle County, this year, voters in Albemarle County will see a bond referendum on the ballot when they go to vote in November. And that bond is for the school system.
Correct.
Can you explain to us what this is all about?
I absolutely can, because this has become a topic that almost on every day I'm having an interaction with somebody in the community, or I'm talking to staff or to members of either our Board of Supervisors or school board. And I think that I would say that what it starts with is really thinking about what's the future of the schools for our kids in Albemarle County, and how are we going to address some of the things that they need. And you know, Albemarle kids distinguish themselves by any measure that we just received our SAT scores yesterday, and they're higher than ever. We have more kids graduating from high school on time than ever. We have fewer dropouts. In fact, there are people who say to me, your dropout rate is the envy of the nation, Pam. And so when I look at how our kids are doing, our kids really distinguish themselves. But the bond referendum is about how do we really build deeper capacity across our schools to be able to address some of the critical needs that we have. And those really sit in 4 areas with this bond referendum. And I guess I would start by saying that what I can do is to share the facts with you.
Right.
But every voter's got to make a decision based on what they think is the right decision in terms of the information that we're able to provide to them. So we have a lot of information to share.
You're not here to lobby for this or sell
Not
this.
at all. Not at all.
But there is a lot of information that we need to be
Absolutely.
able to make this decision and click yes or no on the bond.
Absolutely. And the first thing I would start with is, why did we even decide to go to a bond referendum? And here's what we know, that we typically, when we need to do work to our schools that involves capital improvements, we go through the Virginia Public School Authority to finance the funding that we need to do that work. But what we found as we started doing some research with what other localities in Virginia do to finance is that we found all of the folks that are like us, that are AAA bond rated governments, tend to use bond referendum, because here's what happens. When you have projects you know you need to do, if you go through a bond referendum, you typically get a lower interest rate on the funds you're going to borrow, because the people that are out there that finance bonds say that if you have the full backing of your community, you have your Board of Supervisors, and you have your school board behind it, that they see the community as really being a place that has placed good faith behind the issuing of bonds.
So it ends up being cheaper.
It ends up being cheaper.
Yeah.
And so I think one of the questions that we asked and our board considered is, why would we not ask our community whether they would like to see us finance projects through our traditional methods that go through the VPSA, or whether they would like to see us go through a bond referendum, and if it's voted forward, then we would actually get the money at a less
you also benefit
from
this process of actually reaching out and educating the community about what's going on with the schools.
It absolutely does that, and it says, you know, that the future of schools really has impact on every area of our community. You know, good schools impact property values of homeowners. Good schools impact the University of Virginia and others that are recruiting people to come work here.
Right.
So the quality of our schools is really important. It brings businesses in.
Want to bring their employees around where there's good schools. Yeah.
So it's all about how do we make sure that we sustain the quality of schools that we have. Here's what we found when we literally walked. We have almost 850 classrooms and spaces, libraries in our schools.
And for
26 schools.
For those watching outside the area, Albemarle County is one of the biggest counties in Virginia.
Fourth largest,
over 700 square miles.
That's right.
It's massive.
726 to be exact.
Thank you very much.
But we have 26 schools, and as we walked this almost 850 classrooms, what we did was we did an inventory of what's in the classrooms, what's the lighting like, do they have natural light, what are the electrical outlets like, what's the furniture like if you're in a science lab or a career technical education lab or an art room. You know, does it meet what you would call the standard for 2016 and beyond? And what we found is we came up short. So one of the areas that is in this bond referendum is, quite frankly, modernization of facilities. Science labs, classrooms, could be a career and technical education or vocational lab in our schools, art rooms. We'll be going through a process of how is it that we really make sure that over time that we really bring our classrooms up to par. Now I'll tell you what we also know. The average age of schools in Albemarle County is somewhere in the neighborhood of 46 years. That's the average age. And we have schools that haven't been touched. For example, the science labs out at Western, and I talked to a teacher at Walton the other day who said to me, I had a parent come into my science lab, Pam, and she looked around and said, this looks just like it did when I was a kid here. Nothing's changed. And so, you know, we know that the tools have changed. We know that the ways that teachers want to be able to work in more flexible ways with projects and, you know, whether it's being able to be in direct instruction or whether it's having kids work in projects or seminars, that our teachers need to be able to create these flexible environments so they can move kids in and out of different ways of learning. And
But we do the same thing in a normal classroom.
Sure.
It's got, with flexible spaces now to lecture to the whole group or break out in different groups or work individually. You would think you'd need the same thing in a lab.
Well, and you think about, you go to the Claude Moore building at the medical school at UVA, which is that huge building in the round, and take a look at, you know, I was just at VCU this past week and was in the new library section, and I thought to myself, oh my gosh, our kids are walking into colleges and universities that have also had some pretty substantive changes in the way that they think about how do we organize space and the kind of work kids do. So that modern
and it's all about, I don't mean to interrupt you, but it really is all about best practices.
It absolutely is.
We know there are people who get up every day, really smart people, and they study this stuff. How do we build environments that are going to help our kids learn, help them make the best of their own lives? And we know what the best practices are.
Absolutely.
And this bond referendum is so much about that. It's about creating those environments so that we can literally capitalize on the best practices and make the best schools for our kids so they have the richest experience.
And to be able to potentially, depending on how the vote goes, to get the money, to get more bang for the buck for our money as a result of the way that it gets financed. The other thing about the modernization that's pretty interesting to me is that, you know, I really believe that one of the areas that has to be in the wheelhouse of schools today is looking at the health, wellness, and fitness of kids. And here's something that we've learned from our research. We have many, many, many chairs and desks in our schools today that were purchased years ago, decades ago in some cases, and they're what's called rigid seating. The research right now on being able to stay physically fit and healthy when you are in jobs, including school, where you sit all day, is that you need to have what's called active seating to help you be able to maintain spinal integrity as well as core muscle structure. And what also comes out of the research right now is that kids who may have attention difficulties, when they're in active seating, that they are more likely to be able to sustain attention in the classroom than when they're in rigid seating. So we're looking at even the science of furniture, just like people do that in their offices with ergonomics. So that's a piece of it. There are three other areas, though, that I will tell you that are in this. That modernization is somewhere in the neighborhood of around $10.9 million for 26 schools spread over several years that would modernize science labs, classrooms, bring natural lighting.
Could be a lot more for 26 schools.
Oh my gosh, no kidding. But bring natural lighting. We have classrooms in the system where there is no natural lighting whatsoever. To be able to deal with overhead lighting, with electrical outlets, things that teachers need and that kids need right now to be good learners. We also have 4 schools that we've been working hard on putting in more secure entrances to our schools so that we can control and know who's coming and going, to really increase sort of the safety of the
Sure.
overall plant. And so we have had some grant funding from the state that came forward out of the General Assembly, as well as some local funding that we've been able to get to almost every one of our schools. But the money has run out, and we now have 4 that we have known for several years are going to be more difficult, and they're in different feeder patterns. Little Scottsville Elementary has some challenges to be able to design a new entrance there. Henley Middle School out in the west, Baker Butler up north on 29, and then Murray High School in the community
And
charter.
this bond money would be spent to make those schools more secure and safer.
It would be our last 4 facilities that we need to bring up to par in terms of safe and secure entrances to the schools. So that's one, and that's a little less of a expense, but it's one that we're going to need to address. It's somewhere in the neighborhood of $3 million. Then we also have capacity issues on 29. I think anybody,
really? I wonder why.
that anybody who's been following the growth in Albemarle County, and here's a fact I learned, that in 1990, Albemarle County had about 68,000 people. 2020, we're projecting to be over 115,000.
Wow.
Now,
holy cow.
I know, and with the
goodness.
growth areas and trying to really preserve rural character, which I think we all value in Albemarle, we've concentrated growth. And that means that the northern corridor has been particularly impacted in terms of growth. And also the west with, the Henley, Brownsville, Crozet.
And more people moving in means more kids moving in, means you need more seats, classrooms in those schools.
That's right. The last new school that we opened was in 2003. That was Baker Butler. And we have added 1,000 students countywide since then. And so we're growing. And in the northern corridor, we know that Albemarle is above capacity. Greer, which we just built, we had hoped to build twice as big an addition at Greer 4 years ago, ended up only doing half of it because of the recession.
Yeah.
Greer
So
is
this bond will cover
Greer is over
a lot
capacity.
of those investments.
Agnerhurt is over capacity or close to it again just after opening a new addition. Baker Butler and Hollymead are pretty close to capacity. So we know that we've got to address capacity on the northern end. But the other thing that's really important to us on the north is that, we've had a commitment with the Board of Supervisors and to our community. United Way's been a real player with us in trying to figure out how do we get all the children who really need, because of economic disadvantage, to be in preschool. So we're also really working to add some preschool capacity with an addition to Woodbrook Elementary. So Woodbrook, and in our comprehensive plan for Albemarle County, one of the things that we're committed to at the school board level is increasing the capacity of existing structures before we add new buildings. And here's what that does for us, is that every time you build a new building, you are adding to the operational budget because you need a principal, you need office staff.
Groundskeepers, staff, electricity bill,
When we increase the capacity in an existing school, we don't have to add all those operational costs.
So it's smarter,
it is
cheaper
yes,
right now
to
grow the capacity of existing schools.
And of course, we've got 2 proffers that are moving forward as part of a development that the Board of Supervisors will be considering. And the 2 proffers, one could be land for a future elementary school in the northern end.
Right.
And another parcel could be used for a new high school if we land on that.
So let me ask you this before we take a quick break. Let me ask you to respond to the question that will be out there. People thinking, well, why should I authorize this bond? For all of these projects sound great. We need to do them. As far as I'm concerned, these projects are long overdue for Albemarle County. But there are some who will say, you got plenty of money, Pam. There's plenty of money in the school system already. You don't need any more. Why can't you make do and do these projects with the money you already have? And we often hear that.
Absolutely.
You're wasting money.
Yeah. In fact, I think that sometimes we look at our own children and say, well, couldn't you make do? Couldn't you? And then they start telling you all the reasons why they can't, and it makes sense to you. And at some level, one of the things that I think is a lot of people don't realize is that Albemarle County Schools until this year has been operating since 2007-8 on exactly the same per pupil. We actually dipped well below the per pupil in 2 or 3 budget cycles that we had in 2007-8. Now we've added kids, so we've grown the budget because we've added kids, but our per pupil has stayed basically the same despite inflation And despite something
for the last 9 years?
Yeah, and this year we got a little bit of a bump up because we had some additional funding from the General Assembly, and then our Board of Supervisors has really worked hard to try to figure out how to take a pie that's pretty fixed in Albemarle and be able to divide it between things that are needs on local government side and on school side. Here's another fact that a lot of people in Albemarle County and the region aren't aware of, and that is that over time, Albemarle now has a 35 square mile area around the city of Charlottesville that could, by state standards, be declared a city. It's that urban dense. And that urban density is where much of our poverty in our schools is concentrated. We've seen, Little Greer Elementary, that used to be a solid middle class kind of
now it's facing urban challenges.
Is a school with multiple of 40 plus languages spoken, high poverty, 70% plus poverty in the school. And so we're seeing our urban ring, and this is happening, in cities all over the country, that as cities are changing the way that their demographics look, you're seeing some of that push out into the urban ring around cities, and it's changing the needs. And so we don't just have needs in our urban ring to increase capacity, but also to make sure that the resources
to meet the needs of this new kind of
that's
student.
Right. Because one of the things that I talk about all the time is that I don't care whether a child, in terms of their zip code or their location of home, is in a trailer or in a gated community. What we want for every child in Albemarle is equity and access to a rich and rigorous curriculum, because we don't want to miss the talent and the capabilities of any child. And so that's why we've gone after making some of the changes that we've made in curriculum, in instruction and assessment, the way that we're looking at learning spaces, the way that we're really trying to take the lid off. So when you talk to a Bernard Hairston about our M-Cubed program that puts African American males into Algebra Academy in the summer, what we're looking after is really elevating and lifting the work we do. When we have Girls Geek Day on Saturday mornings for girls to get together and learn how to use technology, when we're building out this new team approach, and at Monticello, I want to talk a little bit about this idea of kids mapping neighborhoods to determine what's needed to close gaps to have neighborhoods be sustainable neighborhoods.
And high school kids are doing
high school kids. I laugh and say that one
sound
of
like government employees.
That I see
architects.
I see our kids in elementary school doing work, interesting work, challenging work, and I think quite fun work that you might have seen at one point in time happening with middle school kids. I see middle school kids. I watched a group of middle school kids on a Saturday morning who had worked all year long to put a high altitude balloon up that would go to the edge of the atmosphere. And they put it up at Dardentow Park on a Saturday morning. And I'm watching these kids, and they're working, and they've got GoPro cameras, and they have figured it all out and where it's probably going to land. And one of them comes over and says, "Ms. Moran, let me see your cell phone. I'm going to put this tracker software on so you can track the balloon with us." And they try it, and it won't go up. And they work and work and work, and the second time that morning that they had made some modifications to the rig, it takes off. 4 days later, the tracker shows them that it has landed over in Spotsylvania County. These kids get in the car, teacher, parents, they drive over and track this down on a farmer's land. They got permission from him to go after it, pull it down, and they have footage of this balloon way up so that you can literally see the curvature of the earth.
Wow.
Middle schoolers are doing that kind of work in
really
Albemarle.
exciting.
How exciting is
so
that?
So the bond referendum, let's let folks know you can get more information online. There it is, albemarle.org/bond referendum, all one word, albemarle.org/bond referendum. Let's take a very quick break. There's more with Pam Moran when we get back. Welcome back. My guest is Pam Moran, the Superintendent of Albemarle County Schools. With the time that we have left, Pam, I wanted to talk to you about something that you and I often talk about and that we really enjoy talking about, the future of the high school, the future of the school. I had a conversation a few months ago with Governor McAuliffe, and he was talking about this, how he has encouraged superintendents and faculty and students all around Virginia to really explore this idea together. What's the future of the school look like? And let's start creating that in Virginia and let Virginia be the national leader and model what schools will look like in the future.
Well, and I think about, you know, and obviously here we are in Thomas Jefferson's community, and I know that as an icon for you and for me that you know, for him, education was all it.
Yeah.
He was all about educating, and while he may have let the females out, I like to think that today he would have a much broader perspective on who should be highly educated.
Right.
But here's the thing I think about is that Virginia is a national leader right now in looking at transforming high schools, because here's what we know. I get very scared when I read the Uber reports about, you know, that they're now putting driverless vehicles into Pittsburgh.
Yeah, they're piloting the program in Pittsburgh.
It, you know, and I
driverless Uber taxis, yeah.
No kidding, and I hear about that there is a company that literally has an algorithm that generates reports for ESPN and Forbes magazine that have not been touched by a human writer. And you read about bricklaying robot machines over in Australia, and I think, what are our kids going to do? But I think that one of the things that we have to come back to, and I am truly a supporter of liberal arts education. I believe that a well-rounded child who thinks, creates, collaborates, can just communicate in every form of media is what we're after today. What in Virginia we're going after is, how do we leverage the tools of today with great teachers to create an environment in high schools that lets kids do a variety of things that are the competencies that they will need to take with them. And I think about this. I think about kids taking competencies that are about being an independent learner but a collaborative learner, being able to go into the workforce and transform yourself as jobs transform, to be able to continue to see yourself as a lifelong learner, to be a community servant, to really take skills into your home and make sure that you have a home that can thrive and be self-sufficient with your family. So when I look at that, I think about how our high school's changing, and one that you mentioned a little bit earlier in terms of your own child is this idea of the flipped classroom model.
Yeah, we were talking about that during the break.
That's right, and so
at night, the child will watch the video lectures online, so you get the lectures as the homework. But in school, you do the reading and the discussion, and there's more time to work together.
Absolutely. And so what I see happening with the technologies, and I laugh and say, I had a one-to-one world when I was a kid, but it was called a pencil, was my one-to-one technology. Today, our kids have every kind of device in their own lives, cell phones, you know, iPad type things, you know.
And they integrate these things into their lives to the frustration of their parents sometimes.
Absolutely.
Because it's always there.
And you know,
amazing.
We talk about how do we have our kids learn how to pick the tools they need to do the learning they need to do, and that is a real competency of the 21st century, in the same way that being able to decide whether you need one kind of hammer or another to build a house was a competency of the 20th century. And so, you know, if we stay out of the playground and don't work with our kids on how to learn using learning tools with great teacher guidance, support, and sometimes even direction, our kids tend to default to technology as entertainment. And in some cases, they can get themselves even into trouble with technology as entertainment. So we see ourselves as having a real educational place in that. You talk about the flipped classroom, and we have teachers all over the county and the city and all over the nation that right now are saying engagement with me as a teacher should be less about kids doing worksheets or listening to lectures, because we have the capability to have kids be able to do some of that, at home
online.
The practice and being able to even get to videos. And sometimes teachers will have kids watching videos from college professors that, that you know, fill in some of the content work. So when they come in, the teacher can really amplify their role as an engager of kids, an interactor with kids. And so that's what we talk about, is how do we increase the level of engagement of our children in the work that we believe is the powerful work of this century, and make sure that they are building the knowledge they need, but also the competencies we need. So when you see your daughter at home using her technology, even if it's at a Charlottesville high school class,
right,
what she's doing is learning something that's going to be incredibly important to her, whether she goes into the workforce or right out of high school and into college. I will tell you that I was recently at VCU and walked around the library, and it was pretty scary to me. I never saw a kid with any utensil in their hand for learning except a phone, a computer, or some sort of a tablet device.
Holding a pen like I like to do all the time.
Me too. I didn't see anywhere in the entire library.
Wow.
I went into what they call their innovation zone, and there are artists and science majors all working on these huge screens where they are right there with their fingers doing art in some cases and then science in some cases. It's just, it's an amazing world.
And it's changing fast, and the schools.
Faster than we can imagine.
And we can't be more fortunate to have you here, Pam, because you get this. And would that more leaders in the school systems across America really, because most of them are afraid. It scares them, this kind of change. But we can't be afraid anymore. We have to embrace this, embrace the challenge, and be courageous enough to take leadership in this challenge and make the schools better.
And I will tell you, Coy, as we start to come to closure, I know how much you value the concept of the citizen leader in your work, in your life, in the way that you do your own business of leading in this community. And one of the things that I believe is that we've really got to be able to have our kids center on how they are going to become the leaders of the future by practicing that right now in the schools. And the more opportunities that we give kids to be able to gain the knowledge and the competencies they need, not just to be kids that get the good grades on the transcript, but what are the things beyond that will change communities and change the future of this country? And I'm all in on these kids. This group of kids, the neo-millennials that are in our schools today, are some of the most exciting, passionate kids I've ever been around, because they're getting a chance to show that to us. And it's exciting.
Good stuff.
So thank you.
Thank you, Pam.
Thank you.
For all the work you do.
Thank you.
Dr. Pam Moran is the Superintendent of Albemarle County Schools. I'm Coy Barefoot. You can find the complete archive of this program online at mediaandcitizenship.org. Have a terrific week, and y'all be good to each other.